The reason we got you on was to talk about what's happening in Ukraine. As a starting point, you must be pleased that the Europeans are stepping up. They're increasing their defence spending, they're offering more assistance to Ukraine, and even suggesting that they'll put boots on the ground as potential peacekeepers.
I am, and I think, frankly, President Trump can claim credit for that. Back in his first presidency, he highlighted this fact, and the reality is that I think we've lived with a complacency since the end of the Second World War, particularly in Europe. Australian troops lost their lives during the course of the World War to protect the Europeans and to protect our way of life and peace, and ultimately Australia was the beneficiary of the United States and others coming to our aid. It's right that we are part of strategic alliances, and we've certainly been a very close partner and remain so. Always will be with the US and the UK in particular, but other partners. But to see Europeans, Germany, Italy, France and other nations in Europe start to increase the amount of money that they're spending in their defence budgets, I think that is encouraging, and there is a long way to go. But to keep somebody like Putin at bay from traversing through Europe, we need to make sure that over the course of this decade and over the course of this century, that European countries are in the best position to defeat any act of aggression.
You must have been shocked then for Anthony Albanese to suggest that he would consider any proposal for Australian troops to be peacekeepers in Ukraine. Is that going too far, surely?
Well, I think certainly the Defence Minister was shocked because he's tried to walk that back today. So clearly the Defence Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, is at odds with where the Prime Minister is. And the Defence Industry Minister as well also tried to find a different form of words from the Prime Minister. I think the Prime Minister was shooting from the hip. I don't think it was well considered. And I think he was trying to take his moment to look tough and to look strong. But in fact, the opposite happened. It was just another example of where Anthony Albanese constantly makes the wrong call. And I think Australians now see not just a weak Prime Minister, but somebody who's completely out of his depth. We're not going to put boots on the ground. And as he's proposing, particularly given that there is no commitment yet from European nations to do a similar thing. I think Keir Starmer's showing great leadership in the United Kingdom, but the fact is that there is a lot to take care of in our own neighbourhood, and we need to start funding defence appropriately. And under this government, they've had $80 billion ripped out of them, and I don't believe that the priority for us as a nation now, with the uncertainty that we see in the Indo-Pacific, is to be putting troops into Ukraine or into Europe.
Well, the RSL and other defence experts have suggested that this would stretch Australia's military assets too far, that it's not the right place to be sending our military personnel. You mentioned some of the other ministers trying to walk this back, but Anthony Albanese is the Prime Minister. He's put this on the agenda yesterday. Surely we need to hear a clear correction from him. Otherwise, we still have that out there that we're potentially part of a peacekeeping force in Ukraine.
But Chris, I just think he keeps making these gaffes. He made it in relation to what happened around the Chinese vessels as well, completely misled the Australian public. Again, he was either out of his depth or hadn't been properly briefed, or maybe both. And it doesn't provide that assurance, the reassurance that Australians require. Australians want from their Prime Minister, particularly in the area of national security, somebody who knows what they're talking about and somebody who has the ability to stand up for our national interest. And the Prime Minister seems to, I don't know, just have some passing interest in national security, but never really gets across the detail.
Well, he was exposed as very weak on national security last week, of course, because rather than condemning the lack of notice for live firing exercise in the Tasman Sea by the Chinese Navy, he was making excuses for them initially. If he's made a mistake here, I again would suggest we need to hear that directly from the Prime Minister, because otherwise what he's talking about could be seen as reckless and dangerous when it comes to Australia's interests.
Oh, no, I agree. I agree absolutely with you. I think the Prime Minister needs to clear this up, because the day before that he was saying that there'd be no troops and that Australia wouldn't commit to those resources, and then he flips the next day, and now, as I say, we've got the Defence Minister and his junior out there trying to clean up the Prime Minister's mess. It doesn't look good for our country, and frankly I think the Prime Minister should admit that he overreached, that he made a mistake, and he should apologise for it and and move on.
All right, you have told us already how you've been getting ready to get through Cyclone Alfred. You're ready for an election campaign? It could be on for young and old as soon as Sunday.
We've been ready since last year, to be honest, so we've been refining our processes and going through all of our policies and the costings, and I think we've got an exciting plan for Australians. We want to get our country back on track, and no Australian can afford 3 more years of a Labor government, let alone a Labor minority government. So we're ready for it. I think calling it on Sunday would be a mistake, and I think the Prime Minister would regret doing so, because if, as we're advised, this cyclone does track across the coast, it is going to be causing a lot of damage. There will be a lot of flooding, and there'll be a lot of families and businesses who are really devastated. And at that time, I think it's really the occasion for the Prime Minister to be governing, not campaigning. And I hope the Prime Minister, he's got until the 17th of May. There's no reason to bring it on early, but we'll see what he does.
Well, thoughts of Australians are all with people in the danger zone. Thanks so much for joining us, Peter Dutton. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Take care, mate. Thank you.